Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show. We're on episode 149, coming up on close to 3 years doing this thing. And we're glad that you will join us today. And hope as you join us that you'll let us know where you're joining from. And always like to recognize those that are with us. and As always, of course, we want to hear your thoughts, questions, comments along the way as well. That makes it all work better and flow better. So, Anton, you want to open up our topic for today?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining. Before I dive into the topic, I want to talk about what prompted me to think about this topic and want to talk about it. And it's something that I'm really passionate about, and it's our technology. But I was reading a post on LinkedIn, and it had a comment from not a comment, but it had like one of those quotes, picture quotes from Adam Grant. If you don't know him, he's a psychologist, organizational psychologist, really smart guy. Really has a lot of great things. Follow him personally. And it talked about how we as a society don't value unscheduled time. We like to have this idea of always being busy, of always making things happen. And he talks about how unscheduled time is necessary and it's not a waste of time. And it made me think about, well, when is unscheduled time a waste of time? And what it made me realize is I looked around, my friends, myself, society in general, and I thought about what do we do with our unscheduled time? Is it truly that we unplug and we get away from work, we get away from the things that stress us out and really burden our mind? Or is it that we fill it with something else? And we may feel like we're recovering on the surface, but deep down, we're actually getting more stressed. We just don't realize it. Or instead of just saying more stress, we'll use it in a different way and say we're putting more load on our brain. So, what is that thing that we do? It's our phones. Think about how often in society or even yourself, we take a break from work. Maybe we go for lunch, maybe we take 10, 15 minutes for, some time, or even at home. What is that time often filled with? It's often filled with this thing. It's often filled with sitting and scrolling social media, scrolling massive amounts of content that's on the web. And oftentimes it's short form videos. And the reality is that is not good for our brain. I've talked about this many times, and we're constantly asking our brains to perform at a super high level. Like I equate it to a professional athlete on the field, right? From their physical standpoint, what they're doing, we're doing that mentally day in and day out because our technology, our exposure to information, our load that we put on our brains is so much higher than it was 50 years ago. And we haven't evolved. We don't have a new brain from 50 years ago. So it's just taking a large load. And that is stressing it out. But when you go and get on TikTok, when you go get on, YouTube or whatever those short videos that we're watching, it feels like you're getting your mind off of work and you're relaxing. So it's a very dangerous thing because we feel that we're disconnecting and we're recovering, but we're actually becoming more burdened with, load of information. So just want to talk about phones today, right? Like talk about they're not all bad, don't get me wrong. Like I walk out the door and all of a sudden the phone's not in my pocket and there's the oh my goodness feeling like I'm walked out naked out there. Might as well be because I don't know what I'm gonna do without my phone. But pretty much addicted to it, right? Like think about it. Are you addicted to your phone? And that's something that we all have to ask ourselves and answer personally. So that's really the topic in a long-winded, conversation. Is our phones good? Are phones bad? What do we do? How do we control them? How do we regulate ourselves? Things like that. So, Kev, what are your thoughts on the phone?
Well, let me welcome Rick and Jeremy. Always good to have Rick and Jeremy with us and appreciate your joining. And those that are joining and haven't let us know, please let us know you're out there and where you're joining from. Yeah, and I have to say, Anton, this is one I struggle with. I need to really get a balanced approach But the question is it a tool or a tyrant? And it's left. I mean, if it's just laying around, it's a tool, just like any other, a screwdriver, a hammer, a wrench. But it's what we do with it. It becomes the challenge. And welcome, Karen. Glad to have you. And but yeah, it's a challenge. I know that. I don't know if it's because I'm curious. I'm a very curious person, so always looking to learn, or if it's, as the old saying goes, got a case of FOMO, fear of missing out, or what is the motivation. But it's hard to just put it aside and leave it alone. But as you've mentioned, the healthy thing is to have breaks. And just as we uh, would not go physical activity, we wouldn't walk or run or exercise nonstop for hours and hours. We wouldn't do that because we know that that's harmful. Well, in the same fashion, exposing ourselves to inputs all the time, constantly, is the same challenge for us mentally and even emotionally, because as we get these inputs, they affect us mentally and emotionally. They have impacts on us. When if your thing to do with your phone is to scroll news sources, you're going to be impacted mentally and emotionally. You're going to be drained and discouraged. And if it's to learn, learning is a good thing. I'm all for it, but there's a point where you just saturate and overload your brain, and the effectiveness of your learning becomes in question, and the negative impact on us um, is a factor. And one of the ones that you've talked about before, and the research is out there, is just screen exposure from a visual standpoint, our eyes. So there's a lot of reasons to really just back up, think about it, and the idea of it being related to unscheduled time is such an important thing. Now, see, I'm of the opinion that, and I know this almost sounds crazy, but one of the things we need to do is schedule unscheduled time so that we protect that unscheduled time. But what we do with that unscheduled time, we need to really be careful. We need to approach wisely. And one of the big challenges is what we do with our electronics. For most people, it's phone. Others, it's a computer, sometimes tablets. The other one that's been around longer and is just as guilty is television. And so, what we do with this can be very important. And if we're going around tired all the time, maybe this is a way to help overcome it.
Yeah, one I'm gonna get a little vulnerable here, and if anybody feels like doing the same thing, I'd love to know your not numbers. Um, so I'm looking at my screen time. I have an iPhone. I don't know if Androids track that, but if you go to settings and you go to, I think it's like the fourth little group of things there, it says screen time, and it tells you what your daily average is for the week. You can see all activity, then click at the top to the week and look through the past few weeks. And as much as I preach about this and as much as I know about this, my phone average is somewhere between 3 and 5 hours a day, depending on the week. If I'm good, I'm at 3 hours a day. If I'm not good, I'm hitting 5 hours a day. And now, mind you, this is everything. This is anytime my screen is on, whether I'm messaging, whether I'm,
Phone call, whatever.
any of that stuff, right? That's total time. If anybody feels, I don't care if your number's higher. I'm hoping it's lower, but knowing society, it's probably up there. Um, if you feel like share. If you feel like share.
I
Share.
don't know. I've never tried it on Android. I'll have to check. And
Okay, I'm curious if
in some
Android
ways,
has it,
I'm
but
almost afraid to, because I don't know if I want to know what I will find,
but
because I
it's
know I use my phone a lot. And so I may not want to know, but it's worth finding out.
But it's something that I'd encourage everybody, and just to take a look and see, and really see if it fits what you want, right? If
Mm,
it says a number that you're happy with, okay, that's fine, that's great. But if it doesn't fit the number that you're happy with, ask yourself why, right? And then try to lower it. And what you are probably going to realize, like I have realized, is that you can't, or you will struggle majorly to maintain it, right? When I've been a good boy, I've been able to get it down to 3 hours. I cannot get under 3 hours. I just don't think I can function daily without that. But mind you, probably an hour of that is texting my girlfriend, back and forth all the time. But still, the whole point is, I think, who said it was addictive? Yeah, Rick said, they're a little of both depending on why and how much we use them. Unfortunately, they can be addictive, right? And that's what proved to me how addictive my phone is. I'm really trying to get that number below 3 hours a day. It seems like a high number, but you don't realize how fast that 3 hours goes on your phone. And so that shows me that I truly have an addiction, right? And what it makes me also go to is why? Why do I have this addiction? Well, the same mechanisms play in our brain as sugar, as,
mm,
drugs that make us want our phone, and it's dopamine. That's the
mhm,
neurochemical that impacts our desire to want to take an action, right? The reward behind using the phone is high. Whether you're on social media and you're getting likes, whether you're seeing very entertaining videos, and especially they're in short form, so it's like constant updates and being able to switch, and there's so much choices. So the reward is high, but the workload is very low. I don't have to do a whole lot to get this level of entertainment, to get this level of mental pleasure, right? And when the reward is high, but the workload is low, my body wants that. That's just how it is. It's not just about a drug, it's not just about sugar. That's just, if it gets that high brain activity, high dopamine release from it, that happens. The problem is, though, what your body also does is that it compares what other rewards exist out there. What are the things you're doing out there to this thing? So if you're struggling with discipline and you call it struggling with motivation, you probably are. And there's maybe things like going to the gym. Maybe there's things like reading a book. Maybe there's things that, doing education, not on a surface level, but a deep learning kind of thing that requires more than 5 minutes, requires you to study for, months at a time, perhaps. And if you're noticing that you're struggling doing the things that you should be wanting to do, it's because the thing that you want to do may have a good reward or a decent reward, but the workload to get it is so much higher than just picking this thing up
mm.
and scrolling through social media, scrolling through videos, scrolling through news articles and things like that. So if that's you, I challenge you to try to keep your phone use low. Like my social media caps out at 45 minutes. That's something that I have improved personally, and I give myself, because even in that timer area, I can set specific app limits. So I can say all my social combined between Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it, I max out at 45 minutes. Now, if there's an emergency or you're doing something, right, I'm actually posting content, engaging people, I may extend it by 15 minutes. It gives you an option like, hey, you're out of time. Do you want to extend it by 15 minutes? But just take a look at that. And I encourage you to try to set a limit for yourself and try to hit it and then see if you're truly addicted, if you can do that.
Welcome, Kwesi, and also Abir. Glad to have both of you. And Abir has a comment that I think is salient, related to what you were just talking about, Anton. Says, important point to get us all aware of, Kevin. I feel scared when I see the time I spend on my phone, but this cannot be changed when your business is online. And see, that's one of the challenges that we're dealing with right now, is that our phone is not just business or not just pleasure for many of us. And trying to figure that balance out, and again, allotment of time spent maybe has to be considered in both contexts, because again, I go back to just like physically, if we're spending uh, work time, we all limit our time at work in one way or another. And so, in the same fashion, if our phone is part of our work process, we need to include that as part of the limit and disconnect. And same way, if we were to go on a continuous vacation, uh, if you plan all kinds of activities all the time in your vacation, there's a point where you're going to become exhausted, even in having fun. And so I think the key point here that we're trying to make is awareness. Is that we don't think about it because it's become such a natural part of what we do, and we need to stop and think about it. Just like we would are trying to be aware of what we eat, we're trying to be aware of our exercise, we're trying to be aware of our spiritual inputs and things. And so we really need to be aware of this and ask the questions and find out. Uh, at some point, it can become, in fact, if it becomes addictive, then you got a whole nother set of problems to deal with because it becomes something that has chemically intertwined with us and even harder to address. So we just really need to stop and think about it. And by the way, one of the principles that I've learned is that just because it can be seen or heard doesn't mean we need to expose ourselves to it. And when we open our phone up, boy, we open a Pandora's box of potential bad stuff that's out there. And if we're not careful, we're going to have impact there. One of the principles that I really am a firm believer in is renewing our mind. It's a principle out of the Bible, and I think it's there because we're designed to need our renewing. And when we are exposing ourselves to bad inputs under the guise of entertainment or whatever through our phones, we may be creating a problem there of not renewing but destroying our brains in the process. Um, let's see. Rick makes a comment. Says, unfortunately, many look to social media for acceptance rather than face to face communication. Face to face is becoming rare. Indeed, it's a challenge. In fact, texting. It's really interesting that I've got relationships with that before I would have dealt with phone calls or personal visits that majority of the time I'm handling via text, and I appreciate the convenience of it and all that. But there's a point also we have to wonder: are we short circuiting even ourselves socially by replacing um our interaction, face to face interaction, with digital interaction? And in fact, again, we have close relationships and we're texting a lot. Are we helping that relationship or are we hurting that relationship? Just something to be aware of and consider. Thoughts on from that angle, Anton?
Yeah, you're right, Rick. I mean, that's really the thing, and it's sad because some people need it. Some people it's the only interaction they're able to get. So I get it. But I think the key point is awareness, right? Like, and I'm okay if you're having your relationships online. Of course, it's not optimal, but at the same time, if that's all the human interaction you're getting, we got to get it where we need, where we can. We need it as human beings. But the key word you used earlier is awareness, right? Like, become aware of why you do what you do. That's my overall message. I think for today with phones, tool, Tyrant, doesn't matter, right? We're using it for work, we're using it for pleasure, we're using it for both. Become aware of why you're doing it, and become aware of when you're doing it, stuff like that, right? So, um, hold on, my dogs are howling. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, I have to say one of the things that's interesting, and the power of a phone device is remarkable. And an example of that for me is, for those that don't know, I am in part of the military, our state guard, and there was a situation probably 3 years ago where I was actually in the hospital with an infection in my hand that was being addressed. But because of the power of a phone, I was able to actually be supporting a mission that we were involved in. And so the power of using your phone is remarkable. And but the problem is it can consume us. Anton, I was just sharing about how when I was in the hospital with my infection in my hand, and that I was helping run a mission using my phone. And so the power of the phone is remarkable, but it's also very scary to consider. And Abir makes another point, and this is part of the challenge that we face. And that is, you're right. The challenge for me is that my clients are from different time zones and continents. The other issue, I still manage the communications myself. Yes, it's overwhelming, but I'm grateful. And so, um, again, the phone is a great tool and it allows us to do great things. But again, when you're dealing globally with people, and if you're not careful, you could just about be active 24/7 by just keeping up and doing what we need to do. And we need to stop and have the awareness of, okay, I still need to be healthy in all regards and be balanced, and really consider how is our phone enter into that, and has it, I go back to the original question, is it a tool for us and that's all it is, or is it become a tyrant? Is it running our life? And it's certainly something I think we all do well to consider. um, Thoughts, Anton? Oh, you're muted there.
Appreciate Abir's comment because that's the reality that many people face. And coming from a coaching world for a long time, I've had these kind of conversations with many executives in my life. And it's not just about phones, it's about schedule, really, because that's really, it's the blurred line between what we're really talking about. And I'd have to have many real conversations of saying, what's priority, right? Is the priority for you to, you know, reach the highest peaks that you're reaching for, or is priority for you to reach a high peak but be in a good state while you get there, right?
Mm,
Um, so what I usually do with folks like that is I say, okay, we're going to make a schedule for you, just like a work schedule, right? You
mm-hmm,
still need to have 8 hours of work. There's a reason why we've had that. And we're even saying 8 hours of work right now is too much. But the point is, right, if you're working internationally, then we need to set specific times and when you're going to go engage. But the whole point is we need to be purposeful with our phone, not just kind of aimlessly doing things and then reacting and then seeing. So step one is awareness, right? Step one is, okay, I'm spending X amounts of time on it. Where do I see waste? Where do I see that I'm actually scrolling and I'm just, getting my brain into reading random stuff, or where am I actually purposeful, right? Maybe I'm looking for clients and maybe I'm going to follow hashtags and I'm going to scroll through that hashtag every day for a little bit. That's fine. But once again, it's purposeful. And you set a timer and you say, I'm going to do 15 minutes of this, maybe 4 times a day to hit different time zones, whatever it may be. And I'm not going to let myself do more than that, right? If I'm following up with clients, I'm going to do X amount of that and just set limits, right? And then see, how are you hitting those limits? Are you actually doing that? Or are you noticing that you're going outside of them? And some people will hit those limits and they'll be fine. And some people will do that and realize that it's not just that I am working internationally. It is actually that I'm spending a significant amount of my time on wasted phone use. That's
mm,
what we really are talking about, right? Like With Kevin and I, we talk about stress. All stress is
Mm.
some stress is necessary. It's the same concept. Some phone use is necessary. For some people, it's a little more. For some people, it's a little less. The problem becomes when we have unnecessary phone use
Mm.
that adds to the load on our brains and our eyes and all that stuff. And we need to cut that out as much as possible, right? So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Well, and again, as I'm sitting here thinking, because I love having flexibility in my schedule. That's just the way I'm wired. That's why I do what I do from a work standpoint. Because the idea of going and punching the clock for 8 hours a day, same time every day, that just almost makes me physically ill to think about. But on the other side of that, uh, if we are so flexible that we have no structure, then we're out of balance. And that's something, we talk about the need all the time to have balance and related to technology. And again, we pick on the phone simply because it's most convenient and it's ever with us. But any of the technology can fall in this category. I go back to computers, tablets, and even television. Television still in electronic form, and the difference is with like television, you have to be where it is, and therefore it's the out of balance aspects of it become obvious because you stay in one physical place for hours and hours, and it becomes obvious. The phone and tablets are not so obvious because they can be with us all the time, whether they're in use or not. And it becomes easy to slide into a pattern of using it more than we should because it is there. And so I think we need to really think that through first, though, is be aware. If your phone is apparently iPhones will help you know what you're doing time wise, and I need to look and see if Android does the same. But if it does, that's real easy to check and see and make a decision. And then if we find that it's out of balance for us, then we add some structure. We figure out, like you said, Anton, scheduling time. And it may be if we're working globally, which is something I do on some level because of my involvement with the International Institute of Influencers. They're primarily centered in the area of India. And so the time zone is 10 and a half hours different. And if the more I do of that, then I've got to begin to let go of other things and adjust and balance out that schedule. So if I am doing something on India time one day, then I need to do less of something on Eastern time that day to, again, keep it in balance. So, wow. Yeah. Awareness, stop and think about what we're doing. And Anton, I love when you talk about some of the brain chemistry. Talk a little bit about the brain chemistry involved with use of phone and electronic inputs and how that affects us physically.
Well, I mentioned dopamine already, right? That's our motivation neurotransmitter. But some of the other stuff that it does impact, and then it ultimately can it connects to many other things. One is, when is a time that we often use our phone? In bed. Um, that's you take a
Mm.
look at your habits. Look, what's the first thing you're reaching for? What's the last thing you're holding before when you wake up, and what's the last thing you're holding when you go to bed? Chances are it's your phone, and that's not good. That's not good for your brain. Your brain's not intended to do that. You got to give it time to wake up. Like, so my rule, as an example, in the morning before I do anything on my phone. Yes, unfortunately, I do use my phone for meditation because I use a timer. I don't even use guided meditation anymore, but I'm a fan of tracking progress. So I use an app that gives me a timer, and it just rings a bell when I'm done at the end of my 15 minutes. So that's the first thing I do every morning. But at night, I force myself to not be on my phone for the last hour as much as I can. Get team, it's not easy. I'm making it sound like it is. It's not. It's years and years of awareness, years and years of constantly talking to myself like, Anton, what are you doing? And I am super protective of my sleep. Like if you ask my girlfriend, she'll tell you it's like weird. Like we'll be out and I'll be like, it's time to go to bed. Like I gotta go home. And she's like, what do you mean? It's like 9:30. I'm like, yeah, it's my bedtime. Like I gotta go to bed. And because I wake up usually about 5:30 in the morning, so I gotta go to bed around 9:30 within 30 minutes plus or minus on each end. Um, and the exposure of the light to us screws up our circadian rhythm, right? It screws up our ability to be able to fall asleep, to wake, some of us wake up early in the morning and can't go back to sleep. And it's set by melatonin, balance of melatonin and cortisol. Cortisol is kind of our stress hormone. Melatonin is our kind of sets our rhythm for the day hormone. And when the biggest way it's set is by light. Light is what sets that balance and releases more melatonin, decreases melatonin in the body. So the first thing that, if what we're doing is having that white light exposure right before we're going to bed, we're telling our brain that it's not time to go to bed. And then you're laying down and your mind's going a million miles per hour thinking about everything. And you're going, well, why can't I shut my mind down? Well, it's because you're sitting here telling it it's daytime because you got a light right in your face and it's very bright light. So like there's many things that you can do. I've talked about this before, but ultimately I'd love to you not have the phone on for the last 2 hours if possible. That's actually what recommendation is minimizing technology use for the last 2 hours. But I've shown this before. If you are using it, like set, I don't know if you can see it, but set a thing where you can, let's see, it's not going to work now, of course. Hold on. There we go. See how it turned red? Um, Taking that, putting a different hue on, like a different color lens. So the red light is not as damaging to melatonin production as white light. So like just basic things like that. If you are going to use it, try to have that. Yes, it's not as bright. Yes, it's not as pretty, but at least it's not damaging your, ability to sleep and stay asleep as much. Because trust me, this doesn't just affect you before sleep. That's the thing that most people think about. It's like, oh, I'm okay. I'm sleeping okay. But then you're having a mid-afternoon crash, during the day. And that's how it could be showing up, that imbalance. There's so many different ways. And then sleep's not good. Now all of a sudden our body can't function the way that it should. And all of a sudden, our body's overstressed. And even though we're not dealing with a lot of stress in our life, right? I've seen this happen all the time. A person goes, well, I don't have a very stressful job. I don't really, my kids are out of my house. I don't really have a lot of that going on. But for some reason, all the symptoms of stress are there. It's because it's a chemical stress. It's more of a oxidative stress, right? They're not sleeping that great. So, or enough time or whatever it may be. And they're having too much phone use. And then it's showing up during the day, but they're not thinking that it's stress because it's like, well, it makes no sense to me. Well, you're stressing your body out because you're not getting enough sleep. So now it's the same thing as a lion's always chasing you. Even though you're not physically stressed in a massive way, it's these chronic drips of stress that create this problem. And then what happens? All of a sudden, digestive tract's not working very well. People are like, what is going on? I'm eating this food that I always used to eat, and all of a sudden it's upsetting my stomach. And I'm like, it's because your digestion is not functioning, right? Like I've talked about this many times before. When your body's under stress, your body drives blood away from two extremities, right? It wants to you be run and perform. What it's not keeping blood in as much is your digestive tract, right? So your bowel movements, all those different things don't work as well. Your body doesn't break down food as well. So now our digestive tract starts to go, and all of a sudden, where's our body make serotonin, our happiness hormone? 80% of it is made in our gut. So now, because we're not sleeping well, because the stress is accumulated over time, now we're also becoming depressed, right? Everything is connected in our system. It's just one continuous chain of stuff. And you have to try to follow it to kind of get to the bottom of it. And oftentimes, phone use can lead to that, over long periods of time.
Well, and another pressure that it occurs to me because I'm in this situation, I am a caretaker for my mom. She's aged, and the link as part of that caretaking has become my phone. And so disconnecting from my phone has other implications. And what's interesting is we've been caretaker role for a long time for people, including our family. And in the past, the phone component was tied to a wire tied to the wall, and therefore had controls, and we would figure out ways to work around it. Now, if we're a caretaker and we're using phone as a means to keep that connection, it's nonstop. And again, unhealthy in nature any more than if we were to sit up round the clock with the person we're a caretaker for. Mentally, emotionally, physically, that is damaging. And so, again, awareness. How are we using our phones? It's a great tool, no doubt, but are we are we out of balance in it? And I think most of us are. I think if we really ask the question and become aware, that we probably will be rather shocked at what we find. But as you've explained, though, the physical, mental implications of not doing it are remarkable. I know I made a choice a few years ago to essentially, I've disconnected from live television. I do not watch live television, but yet I am on my phone a great deal. And I'm wondering, have I exchanged one problem for another in the process? And so back up, look, consider. And again, I have to be honest, it's something that I'm having to weigh out and just first becoming more more aware of. And I find it funny you were mentioning changing the hue on the screen. In our military training, we know that when we're doing night operations, we go to night vision and red light and things like that because of all that. So a lot there to be aware of and learn. And to, again, I think what our key is structuring. And really, as part of our structure, just like hopefully we wouldn't leave other aspects of our schedule and things to purely to chance, let's not leave our phone use to chance. Structure it and consider how we prioritize it. Very, just truly amazing as I think about it.
Yeah, and I was looking up, Android does have the timer, I mean, the screen time thing. It's a digital well-being app. I think it comes standard on
Okay.
Androids, if not downloaded. But that's
Digital
the one thing I
well-being
wanted.
app.
Was that digital
Digital
well-being app?
well-being app.
Yeah.
Okay.
So folks, whether you have an Android, whether you have a iPhone, you can do this. And like I said, I've had these conversations hundreds of times with people who want change in their life, and you're telling them, I need you to put your phone down, and they're giving me a million reasons why they can't, right? And sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes it's like a year of working with them until they finally get it. And we all have to arrive there on our own, right? It's not something that I could just, convince you all right now, but I'm telling you, I just want you to become aware how dependent on it you are, and just test yourself. If you can do it easily and you can manipulate how much phone time you use and control that, you're probably fine. But if you're like most of us, chances are you're going to struggle. And if especially if you're not doing business on it, like, what is a reason to use your phone more than 3 hours a day? I don't see it. I mean, honestly, like, I don't get why we would, but we do. We do all the time. And one thing I always think about is, like, when was the last time I was bored? I can't remember. Like, I can't remember the last time I was actually bored. It's because I always have this little friendly companion, tool or a tyrant, right? Depends on how you want to look at it, that helps me to not be bored at any given moment, anytime. But is that good for me or not, right? Is that good for my children or not? That's even worse. We as adults are busier than our kids. If you have children, take a look at their screen time, right? Like, my daughter had a panic attack at school like a month ago, and then not like her. And I was like, what is going on? I had to sit down with her, and I was like, look, I'm not a parent that forces a lot of things on my kids. I try to talk to them and try to help them make their own decisions as much as I can. And I showed her screen time, and I really started to explain how damaging that is to her, and then what it does for her. And now she's trying to limit it. So whatever it is, become aware of it. I don't want to like beat this horse to death any further, but I do want you all to wake up to it. And I am a little bit of that tough love person. I've always been that person. And sometimes we have to hear some really hard truths from friendly people to be like, you know what? I am making excuses. I am giving myself a way
Mm.
out. And I'm really not seeing that it's just an addiction that I'm covering up. And I'm going to go far as saying if you ever met an addict, like a true addict, a drug addict, there is a million reasons why they will tell you why they need to go and get that next hit. And they're the best at it. They will use emotions, they will use logic, you name it, all of it to find the reason to get that next hit. Make sure you're not that way to yourself, giving yourselves a million reasons why you need to go get on your phone.
Yeah, what's sad is this addiction is socially acceptable, and
Hmm.
it's unfortunate. And most of us, if we're pressed, we would say we need more time. Well, I tell you what, use of a phone can be a big, big time suck. And so um, if you're having trouble with not having enough time, maybe one of the first things you need to ask is, if I put my phone down a little more, how much time will I have that I don't have currently? And, if we are managing it well, that's pretty easy. It's a matter of turning it off, or setting it on the table, or put it in your pocket and leave it there. There's that, and that may be a way to gain a lot of time back that we are missing, or we're spending rather than investing. One of the things that I've been really encouraging folks to do is don't spend your time, invest it, because of all the different things we have available to us. Time is a very precious thing, because once it's gone, you don't get it back. There, and so if you're not using your time well to get good returns with it, it's a huge, huge waste, and it's one of those that comes with regrets if we're not careful. Um,
And Rick chimes in. We
mhm.
don't need more time. We need to use what we have wisely. And that reminds me, and both your conversation reminds me, financially, many people preach secondary incomes, right?
Mhm.
Multiple streams of incomes for that
Right.
matter. And people go, "Oh, I don't have time. I have a full-time job. I have kids. I have all this stuff." And you sit down with them and you look at their phone time and you got 2 hours of social media a day, and they're not using it to build a following, to build a business, to create a message, to create a brand, which I understand many people are. Beer, I know you have a strong LinkedIn brand. That's one thing. They're just on there. They're just wasting it. So then you sit down and you go, okay, that's 2 hours a day. That's what, 730 hours a week. I mean, that's 730 hours a year, roughly, right? My math is probably a little off, but the point is, it's almost 1,000 hours a year that a person could have to build something for their future when they're saying they don't have time because it's just hidden. It's tucked away. We're not aware of it. And imagine you can build a business like that. 2 hours a day, shoot, you can definitely build a business or at
Yeah.
least some sort of a secondary stream of income. So think about that, right? Are we using that time wisely, as Rick said?
Well, and something, we're on the topic of time. People say I need to be a better time manager. Most of us don't need to be better time managers. We need to prioritize better. If we get our priorities in order, then our time will follow. And is our priority to be addicted to our phone, or is it other things? If so, set your priority, and that should help us even in dealing with our phone concerns. In fact, we talk about don't try to go away from something, run away from something, but to run towards things. That's how we do better positive effects. So, and as we consider our priorities, let's get those and move towards those. And if those priorities mean putting down our phone more often, or turning it off, or adjusting, then by all means do it. And what's really funny is you mentioned um, the app to help with the digital keeping. If we really want to find balance with use of a phone, there's an app that will help you do that too. If we just, it's not hard stuff, and we make it hard because we're not aware, or we choose to ignore. Um, and so we just really need to consider that our best tool could be becoming our worst enemy in the process. And I think about, I have, because of my background, I have some favorite tools around, but I wouldn't picture myself carrying that tool around in my pocket all the time. We like power tools, they're great, they make our work easier, but I would not walk around day in and day out with that power tool in my hand, get just in case I might need it. So, really, really needs to be something we consider. Um, and for those of you that are, again, concerned about um, tracking and stuff like that, well, one of the best ways to, if that's a genuine concern, is to turn your phone off for a while. That at least keeps you from being able to be tracked that way. But
You
yeah.
know, one trend that I guess even my kids told me about, but I've looked into, um, it's a dumb phone trend where
Hmm.
dumb phones are becoming popular because people are realizing that, you know what, I am addicted and I can't stop. So instead of putting myself in a situation where I have to make the right choice, I'm gonna take away the bad choice, right? I'm just gonna switch to a dumb phone. But if you don't know what a dumb phone is, it's pre-smartphone, right? Before we had that big old screen that did all these things, it did calls, it did text messages, and some minimal internet access.
And even text messaging, if you get a truly dumb phone, is not easy because you have to do a process called T9 texting, and that'll curb some of your texting because it's a pain in the neck.
But the point is, right, like it's taking yourself out of the situation where you're tempted. And that's why it's becoming a thing, in my opinion, is because people realize that like I cannot control this thing. So instead of trying to force myself to and keep feeling like a failure, I'm just gonna get rid of it and I'm gonna switch to a thing. And people are talking about they're feeling so relieved when this is happening. Yep, flip phones, Rick. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Those kind of things, or those Motorola little things that we used to use not too long ago. It's crazy just to think about. Like I remember when those things were all the popular thing. Like that was what you had when you were so cool and it was so great. And just to think about in a short amount of time, how far we've come with that technology. Like I said earlier, this thing has not adapted. Our brain is still the same brain it was 50 years ago. We don't evolve that fast, but our demand on it has astronomically increased, and we have to talk about it. We have to do things about it. The other thing I would say too is like we have internet everywhere these days.
Mm.
There's no reason that you need it in your pocket because you feel like you can't get internet. Like you can go and grab somebody's Wi-Fi and log in into your computer. That's one thing that I'm also trying to do myself a little bit more is if I'm working, I'm trying to stay on my laptop. So then
Mm.
I know that's truly working time and I don't I don't spend that time on aimlessly scrolling and doing things. And that way I try to create a little bit of division for myself because I
Mm.
being in the world that I'm in, working with clients internationally and working in clients all over the U.S. time zones, I'm really on from 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. Right, like that's really when I need to be available. But it doesn't need to mean I always have to be on my phone. I just have to set checkpoints where I go turn my laptop on. I can even set a message in my Teams and say, "Hey, I am out of office from 5 p.m., but I will check it again at 8 p.m. and that's when I'll get back to you." Right? Like there's so many things that we can do, but we can wrap this up, with some final messages and stuff. And mine is just for you to become aware. Like,
Mm.
please spend some time understanding how much phone time you use, and if you are addicted to it because you can't lower and control it. Just start there. It's like I've talked about addiction a few times in this conversation, and the first step of fixing addiction is admitting you have a problem.
Mm.
Doesn't matter what program you use, doesn't matter where you go psychologically, but that's the step one is I have a problem, I need to change. If you keep doing phone use and abuse, more importantly, but you keep telling yourself that, I don't have a problem, I have a need, I have to do it this way, never going to change. So you have to really become aware and admit it to yourself.
Yes. And the other thing that, again, is a basic principle and that's intentionality. Most of us are not purposeful or intentional with our phones. It's just there and we just let it be all the time versus being intentional. We would not be, there's not much other things that we would be so unintentional about in our life. But we are very unintentional and unpurposeful with our phone device. And that's unfortunate. And so I know one of the things that I'm going to be doing is checking into how to find out about time spent on phone, and then some other uh, uh, ideas of ways to manage and be more intentional with my phone use. And I hope others will consider it. Now, it's kind of ironic that I'm a baby boomer and I've got this challenge because most baby boomers avoid their phones like the plague at times. So, but it can happen. And I encourage others to really stop and think about it, become aware, and make choices and be very intentional with your phone. And don't allow excuses, business, personal pleasure, need from a family caretaker standpoint. There's a lot of reasons that we can, or let me back up, a lot of excuses we can make for not being very intentional about how we use electronics in general, but the phone in particular, because it's especially, it's so convenient that it becomes really hideous. And so we really do need to consider it because, again, as Anton's explained, the physical, mental, emotional implications of it are remarkable. It's not this little innocent, it's not like carrying around a screwdriver in your pocket. That tool, there's limited ways you can use it and times you can use it. A phone, not so. You can use it just about all the time in some way for some reason if you allow it and you're not intentional with it. So
one thing I forgot to mention, and I totally spaced this, so I had to go back and look at the post my daughter shared with me, or not a post, but a article. ADHD is
mm,
skyrocketing.
mm,
Kids, adults, you name it, and the article talks about ADHD is skyrocketing, and America is not prepared, and we're not. Because nobody's attributing ADHD to our dopamine baseline being off. They think it's some sort of genetic thing, or it's something else. But remember, we talked about those spikes of dopamine that are easy to come from the phone. Well, what that does over time is our baseline of where our normal dopamine is, it comes down. So we have way less at any given point than we need, and we need dopamine for focus. It's one of the things that norepinephrine and dopamine are the things that come in those ADHD drugs or stimulants to provide that for our brain, make our body make more. And we are not looking at how the phone's creating that. So if you have kids and you're worried about them having ADHD, if you're having issues with focus, that's the first place to start.
good point. And as someone, I've never been diagnosed, but I'm 99% sure that I would be categorized as either ADD or ADHD, and something that can factor in that my lack of focus can be influenced because for many years I've managed to cope with it so that I can function, and it may be that phone is something that's going to keep help or hurt me in the effort to live with that and control it. So again, another great consideration. Maybe our ADD ADHD is more in the form of electronics and not something that we have to be subject to, if you will. So good point, Anton. So wow. Hopefully, if nothing else, we've raised a flag today and said, "Hey, check this out. See if it's true, and if so, if you want to be healthy, you want to live well, this is something that needs to become part of your consideration, just like exercise, just like uh, movement. I like the term movement, Anton. I know you do prefer that, but movement, and then how we approach other things. This is one of those things that needs to be part of that consideration. So, any final thoughts as we wind down, Anton?
Nah, thank you. Thank you as always. I always want to remember to show gratitude for the audience, Rick, Abir, um, everybody that engaged, Karen, Jeremy. Thank you all so much for your comments. Thank you all who are watching this now, who are watching this on replay. If you see the hashtag down there, hashtag human SOS, please follow it. I'm trying to do a better job myself of getting people to follow it. We have like 90 followers. I'm excited. We got 2 followers last week. Um, but we want to create a movement and where people understand what we're talking about in this little show. Like me and Kevin are not the most entertaining people in the world. I know that. I think Kevin knows that. Like
We're not the fun guys.
we don't have the fancy graphics and fancy production teams to make these lives be something that is super entertaining. So I'm grateful for you sticking with us. I'm grateful for you helping us to stay motivated to keep pushing this message along, but we also need help, right? We need help from each of you to follow the hashtag. Point A. Point B is start using the hashtag yourself. It's not for us. It's not for me and Kev. It's a human SOS stands for humanly sustainable operating system, right? Whether it be in society, whether it be in the workplace, we have to operate in a more humanly sustainable way. Otherwise, we are going to have to deal with a lot more problems that we are now. They're not going to get better, and it's going to get a lot worse before we start to talk about how many to course correct. Well, let's course correct before we get to that point, right? So we need your help, and I appreciate you for doing that.
Yeah, help us bring that awareness. And we can't do it on a 1 hour weekly podcast. We need everybody to get involved, and we appreciate your joining. So thank you. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, 8 o'clock Eastern, and hope that you'll come back and bring others so that we can grow this movement. In the end of the day, it's about helping all of us. It's not about Anton and I. It's about making a difference in our society, in our world, and in the people we love and live with. So thanks. We'll see you next week. Look forward to it. God bless. Bye now.